There's a thing about the building I live in that took me almost a year to understand. It isn't that the rent is too cheap, though it is. It isn't the elevator that's been broken since before I was born, or the manager who never sleeps, or the 9 rules on a little laminated card by my front door. It's the 9th rule. Do not use your people after 9 p.m. If you hear knocking, do not look, do not answer. Wait for morning. I thought it was a joke. Everybody does. For about a week. And then one night you hear 3 slow knocks at your door, perfectly spaced, too patient to be human. And a voice that sounds exactly like someone you love asks you very gently to let it in. By the time you understand the rule isn't a joke, it already knows your name. It already knows your face. And it has all night, every night, for as long as you live here, to convince you to open the door. My name doesn't matter. What matters is the rule. So before I tell you how I learned it, write this down. Don't use your people after 9. The rent was the first thing that should have warned me. $800 a month for a 1-bedroom, utilities included, in a city where the same square footage went for twice that 3 blocks over. I told myself it was luck. I told myself the building was just old, and old buildings were cheap, and cheap was exactly what a man 2 months behind on everything needed. The building was called the Hadley. 6 stories of brown brick on a street where the brown brick had mostly been torn down and replaced with glass. It had survived because nobody important had ever wanted it. That was what I assumed anyway. I assumed a lot of things back then. The manager's name was Mr. Voss. He met me in the lobby with a ring of keys so heavy it pulled his whole arm down when he carried it. And he didn't smile, not once, the entire time he showed me the place. He had the look of a man who had stopped sleeping years ago and made his peace with it. The apartment itself was fine, better than fine. High ceilings, real wood floors, a radiator that clanked but worked. I remember standing in the empty living room and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was the feeling that maybe things were going to be okay. Then Mr. Voss handed me a single laminated card. "House rules," he said. "Read them. All of them. Tonight." I took the card. I expected the usual. Quiet hours, no smoking, take your shoes off, don't prop the front door. And most of it was that. But there were 9 rules on that card, and the 9th one was different. Do not use your people after 9 p.m. If you hear knocking after 9 p.m., do not look, do not answer, wait for morning. I laughed. I actually laughed, standing there in my empty new apartment. I thought it was a bit. I thought maybe the building had a reputation, some old story they used to keep the college kids from throwing parties. Mr. Voss did not laugh. He looked at me with those tired eyes, and he said the only thing that night that gave me a real chill. Most people think it's a joke too, for about a week. Then he gave me the keys and he left. I moved in over a weekend, hauled boxes up 3 flights because the elevator had a sign on it, out of service, that looked like it had been there since before I was born. By Sunday night, I had a bed, a coffee maker, and a working understanding of which stairs creaked. I should tell you where I was that summer, so you understand why I stayed. I'd lost a relationship and a better apartment in the same month. I'd put $2,000 on a credit card just to make the move happen at all. The warehouse job was the only thing standing between me and going back to my mother's house at 29. And the thought of that, the long drive back, the spare room, the look on her face, frightened me more than any laminated card ever could. I want you to hold on to that, because later, when you wonder why I didn't just leave, the honest answer is that I had nowhere to leave to. The building knew that about me. I think it knew that about all of us. Desperate people make the best tenants. We don't ask the questions we should. That first night, alone in the dark with my boxes still taped shut, I lay on a bare mattress and listened to the Hadley breathe around me. The pipes, the settling. Somewhere far off, water running in another unit. And underneath all of it, so faint I told myself I was imagining it, a sound I couldn't place, a soft, rhythmic, patient sound coming from somewhere above me or below me or in the walls. I told myself it was the building. Old buildings make sounds. That's what I told myself that first night, before I knew enough to be afraid. I met two of my neighbors that first weekend. The first was a woman named Dolores across the hall in 3B. She had to be 80, tiny, sharp-eyed, the kind of old woman who has decided she is no longer afraid of anything and finds the whole world a little bit funny because of it. She brought me a foil-wrapped plate of something I think was banana bread, and she stood in my doorway and looked me over like she was appraising a horse. "You read the card?" she asked. "The house rules?" "Yeah." "All 9? "All 9. She nodded slowly. "Good. Most of them don't matter. The garbage chute, the laundry hours, that's all just Voss being Voss. But the last one matters. The last one's the only one that's ever mattered." I asked her what the deal was with it, why a building would have a rule about Peephole. She just patted my arm with a hand like dry paper and said, "Wait for morning, sweetheart. That's the whole rule. Whatever you hear, you wait for morning. And in the morning, it's always fine. In the morning, it's always fine." She said it like a comfort. It didn't land like one. The second neighbor I met was a guy about my age named Pratt in 3D, end of the hall. He had the haunted, over-caffeinated energy of someone working 2 jobs and losing both. We bonded over the broken elevator and the radiators and the fact that we were both, clearly, here because of the rent. When I brought up the peephole rule, he got quiet in a way Dolores hadn't. He looked down the hallway toward the stairwell, and then he looked back at me and he said, "Just do what it says, man. Seriously. I know it sounds insane. Just do what it says." And that was the thing that started to get under my skin. Not the rule itself. The way the people who'd been here longer talked about it. Like it wasn't a superstition, like it was a weather report. The first week, nothing happened. I was working nights at a distribution warehouse, 12-hour shifts, so half the week I wasn't even home after 9. The nights I was home, I'd hear the building settle, the pipes ticking, the radiator banging, footsteps overhead from 4C. Ordinary building sounds. I'd glance at that laminated card on my fridge where I'd stuck it with a magnet, and I'd feel a little embarrassed about how seriously everyone took it. The first time I heard the knock was a Thursday. It was 20 past 9. I was on the couch, half asleep, some show murmuring on my laptop. And there were 3 knocks on my door. Slow, evenly spaced. Knock, knock, knock. My first instinct was completely normal. Someone was at my door. Probably Pratt, locked out, or Dolores needing something. I started to get up. I started to walk toward the door, and I was maybe 4 feet from it, my hand half raised, when I remembered the card. Do not look, do not answer. Wait for morning. I stopped. I stood there in the middle of my own living room, feeling profoundly stupid. Because it was almost certainly a neighbor, and here I was treating a knock on the door like a live grenade. The knock came again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same weight. And I want to tell you exactly what was strange about it. Because at the time, I couldn't have put it into words, but I felt it. The knocks were too even, too perfectly spaced. A person knocking has a little human variation in it, a little impatience, a little rhythm. This was metronomic. This was a knock that had all the time in the world. I called out, "Who is it?" Nothing, no answer. Just, after a moment, knock, knock, knock. Exactly the same. I looked at the people. It was right there. 2 seconds, 1 glance, and I'd know. It would be Pratt's stupid, grinning face, and we'd laugh about it, and I'd feel ridiculous for the rest of my life. I put my hand on the door. I leaned in. And I swear to you, the moment my eye got close to that little glass circle, every animal part of my brain that had been quiet my whole life stood straight up and screamed, "No." I didn't look. I don't know what stopped me, the card maybe, Dolores's voice, Pratt looking down that hallway. I backed away from the door and I sat down on my couch and I put my back against the armrest so I was facing the door and I waited. The knocking went on for a while. I didn't count how long. Long enough that no real person would have kept doing it. Long enough that it stopped being a knock and started being a message. And then, sometime around 11, it stopped. I didn't sleep. I sat on that couch with my eyes on the door until the light came up gray through my windows. And at 6 a.m., when the sun was fully up, I finally crossed the room and I looked through the peephole. Empty hallway, nothing there. In the morning, it's always fine. I opened the door. The hall was exactly as it always was. I knocked on Pratt's door at the end. When he answered, bleary, I asked him if he'd come by my place last night. He just looked at me, and he said, "No, man, after 9, I don't go in the hallway either." I started paying attention after that. Not just to my own door, to the building. The way it worked. The unspoken systems everyone followed without ever talking about them. And the more I watched, the more I realized the Hadley ran on a kind of quiet, total agreement that I'd walked into without understanding. Nobody was in the hallways after 9, not ever. By 8:45, the building emptied out like a tide going out. You'd hear doors closing, locks turning, and then nothing. If you needed to do laundry, you did it before 9, or you waited till morning. If you came home late, you came in fast, and you got behind your own door and you stayed there. And every single apartment, I noticed, had something over the peephole. A piece of tape, a little hinged cover, a folded square of cardboard. Something to keep it covered. Except mine. Mine was bare. I'd been here 2 weeks and I hadn't covered it because covering it would have meant admitting that the rule was real. I asked Dolores about the knocking. I caught her in the morning in the laundry room, and I told her about the 3 knocks and the even spacing, and how it had gone on for hours. I expected her to be surprised. She wasn't. "First knock comes in the 2nd or 3rd week, usually," she said, folding a towel. "It learns where you are. It's just getting to know you. It's just getting to know you." I asked her what it was. She thought about it for a long moment. And then she said something I've never forgotten. "I've lived here 41 years, and I've decided the kindest thing I can tell you is that I don't know, because the people who tried to find out, they're the ones who aren't here anymore." She wouldn't say more than that, but she did tell me one thing, almost as an afterthought, as she gathered up her laundry basket and headed for the door. "It can copy a voice," she said. "If you hear someone you love out in that hallway after 9, crying, asking you to open up, that's not them. They're not in the building. It just listens, and it learns, and it gets better. Don't ever forget that. Whatever it sounds like, it's never them." I want to tell you that I took all of this seriously. I want to tell you I covered my peephole that day and followed every rule and minded my own business. But I was 29 years old and broke and exhausted, and a part of me, a loud, stubborn, modern part of me, still could not accept that I was being asked to believe in a monster in the hallway of a brick building in a city of 4 million people. A part of me needed to see, so I made a plan, a stupid, stupid plan. I bought a cheap little USB camera, the kind people use for video calls, and I rigged it up to the inside of my door, taped over the peephole, lens pressed to the glass, running to my laptop. The idea was simple. If something was out there, I'd never have to look with my own eyes. I'd watch it on a screen. There'd be a layer of glass and a layer of plastic and a layer of pixels between me and whatever it was. Safe, scientific. I told myself the rule said don't use your peephole. It didn't say anything about a camera. Looking back, I think that's exactly the kind of loophole the building was waiting for. That night I set it up. 9 o'clock came, The building went quiet around me the way it always did. I sat at my desk with the laptop, the camera feed open, a black and white fisheye view of my empty hallway, and I waited. Nothing happened for over an hour. The hallway just sat there. The fire door at the end, the radiator, Dolores's door, Pratt's door, the worn carpet. I started to feel that familiar embarrassment creeping back in. And then, at 10:47, the hallway lights went out. Not flickered, went out. All at once, the whole hall dropped into black, and my camera switched to its night mode, everything washing into that grainy, gray-green infrared. And the hallway was longer. I want to be precise about this because it's the part nobody believes. The hallway in my building is short. 4 doors, maybe 40 feet, fire door at the end. On the camera, in the dark, it kept going. The doors marched off into a distance that should not have existed. 20 doors. 40. The hall stretched back into a grainy, gray vanishing point, and the carpet went with it, and the radiators repeated down the wall, smaller and smaller into the dark. And down at the far end of it, way down where the real wall should have been, something was standing. I couldn't make it out. It was just a shape, a vertical smudge of slightly wrong in the infrared. Too tall. Standing perfectly still, facing my door. And then it started to walk. Not fast. That was almost the worst part. It came up that impossible hallway at a slow, patient, unhurried pace. And as it came, the doors slid past it, and it got bigger in the frame, and I still couldn't make out what it was. The infrared smeared it, my eyes wouldn't hold the shape of it. But I could see that it was wrong. The proportions were wrong. The way it moved was wrong, like a man imitating walking who had only ever had it described to him. I should have closed the laptop. I should have looked away, but I couldn't. I was frozen the way you freeze in a nightmare, and I watched it come all the way up that hall, door by door by door, until it was standing directly outside my apartment. And then the camera feed showed me its face, pressed right up to the other side of the peephole. It had my face. It was wearing my face. Crude, like a mask made by someone working from a photograph, the proportions almost right and horribly not. And it was smiling, a smile too wide for the face it was wearing, and its eyes were open and black and looking directly into the camera lens, which meant it knew the camera was there, which meant... Knock, knock, knock. The knock came through my real door, an inch from my real face, and I screamed and threw myself backward off my chair, and the laptop went with me, and the screen cracked and went dark, and I was on the floor of my apartment in the silence with my own heartbeat slamming in my ears. And from the other side of the door, in my own voice, my exact voice, pitch perfect, warm and casual, it said, "Hey, it's me. I think I left my keys inside. Can you let me in?" And put my hands over my ears like a child. I crawled into my bathroom, the only room with no door to the hallway, and I sat in the bathtub with my knees against my chest until morning. It knocked on and off in my voice for hours. It got more elaborate. It told jokes I'd told. It mentioned my mother by name. It begged. It got angry. Toward the end it cried, and the crying was the worst thing I have ever heard, because it was my own voice crying, and it was good at it. And then the sun came up, and it stopped, and the building went silent, and somewhere outside I heard a bird. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, and I sat in my bathtub until almost noon. And when I finally came out, the laptop was on the floor where I'd dropped it, screen shattered. I went and knocked on Dolores's door. When she saw my face, she didn't even ask. She just stepped back and let me in and put a kettle on. "You looked," she said. It wasn't a question. I told her about the camera, the loophole. I told her I'd thought I was being clever. And she shook her head slowly the whole time with an expression that wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was pity. "The rule isn't about your eyes, child," she said. "It never was. The rule is about attention. The moment you look for it, really look with intention, trying to see it, you tell it that you're willing to. And once it knows you're willing, it doesn't stop coming." I asked her how to make it stop. She set a cup of tea in front of me, and she was quiet for a long time. And then she said, "I've only seen 2 people make it stop, and I'm not sure you'll like how." Here is what Dolores told me over 2 cups of tea in the gray light of that terrible morning. The Hadley was built in 1911. For most of its history, it was an ordinary building with ordinary problems. The thing in the hallway, she didn't have a name for it, nobody did. Arrived sometime in the late 1970s. She'd been here when it started. She remembered the first winter the hallways went quiet. Nobody knew where it came from. People had theories. A tenant who died badly in 4C and was never found for 3 weeks. A thing that came up out of the basement when they dug down to fix the foundation. A door, some people said, that someone had opened and never managed to close. Dolores didn't put stock in any of it. "The why doesn't help you," she said. "Only the rules help you." And there were rules beyond the one on the card. Rules the long-term tenants knew. Rules you learned by surviving, or you didn't learn at all. It only operated between 9 p.m. and dawn. Sunrise, real sunrise, sent it back to wherever it stayed during the day. Nobody knew where that was. It could not come through a locked door on its own. It needed you to open it. That was the whole game. Everything it did, the knocking, the voices, the faces, all of it was just one long, patient effort to get you to open the door yourself. It could not force its way in. It could only ask. It got stronger the more attention you gave it. A new tenant who ignored it might get a few knocks and nothing more. Someone who engaged, who answered, who looked, who acknowledged it, taught it, fed it, made it specific to them. And once it had your face, Dolores said, once it had learned you well enough to wear you, it had you. From that point on, it would come for you every single night. And it would only get better at it. And the only question left was how long you could hold out. "How long do people usually hold out?" I asked. She looked at me. "It's not about how long," she said. "It's about getting it to lose interest, or finding it something else to want." That word, something else, sat between us for a moment. And then she told me about the 2 people she'd seen make it stop. The first was a man named Eckhart in the 80s. He held out for almost a month, stopped looking, stopped answering, covered his peephole, did everything right. And one night the knocking just stopped, and it never came back for him. "It got bored," Dolores said. "Sometimes, rarely, if you give it absolutely nothing, not a flinch, not a single night where you crack, it loses the thread of you, forgets your shape, moves on. But you have to be perfect, for weeks. One bad night and it has you again, fresh." I asked about the second person, and Dolores got very still, and she said, "The second person gave it someone else." I didn't understand at first. "There was a woman in 5A, she said. Back in the 90s. It was wearing her down, months. She wasn't going to last, and she knew it. And there was a man in 5C, a bad man, Dolores said, the kind of man the building was better off without, who beat his wife, and worse, and everyone knew it, and nobody could do anything. And one night, the woman in 5A waited until she heard the knocking start at her own door, and instead of staying quiet, she went out into her own apartment and she said out loud into the dark, 'Not me, him. 5C, go to him.' And it did." I asked what happened to the man in 5C. "He moved out 2 weeks later, white as a sheet, wouldn't talk to anyone, and the woman in 5A was never bothered again. She'd given it a new face to learn, a new door to stand at, and it took the trade. Dolores looked at me over her teacup, and her old eyes were very clear and very cold. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you it can be done. What you do with that is between you and whatever you believe in. I should have just done what she said, covered the peephole, kept my head down, served my time. But the same stubborn part of me that had rigged up the camera couldn't let it go. I needed proof. Not because I doubted Dolores. After that camera feed, I didn't doubt anything. But because I needed to understand the shape of the thing I was caught in. A man drowning still wants to know how deep the water is. So I started digging. I spent my days off at the public library downtown in the local history room, pulling microfilm and old city directories and anything I could find on the Hadley. And what I found over about a week made the floor drop out of me a piece at a time. The building changed hands 11 times between 1978 and now. 11 owners in 40-some years, in a city where buildings stay in the same family for a century. Every few years, a new shell company, a new name on the deed, the property quietly sold and quietly resold. And every single owner, going back decades, had the same property manager listed on the filings, the same name on document after document, year after year, owner after owner. Voss. I sat in that quiet library room and I did the math, and it didn't work. The Mr. Voss who handed me my keys looked maybe 60, but the Mr. Voss on a leasing document from 1981 was already managing the building, already signing the same careful signature. Either it was a father and a son with the same name and the same handwriting, or it was something else, something that had been tending the Hadley for a very long time, keeping it occupied, keeping it fed. And then I found the vacancy notices. Old newspaper classifieds, decades of them. The Hadley advertised constantly. Always a unit open, always the same too good rent, always the same line at the bottom of the ad, the same 9 words that I now know by heart. Quiet building, reasonable house rules, serious inquiries only. But here's what stopped my heart. I cross-referenced the old tenant names, the ones I could find in directories and voter rolls and the occasional newspaper mention, against later records, against obituaries, against missing persons archives. Most of them just vanished from the record. People who lived at the Hadley for a year or two and then simply stopped appearing anywhere, the way Dolores said. No forwarding address, no later listing. As if the city had quietly closed over the space where they'd been. And one name appeared in every set of records I could find, going back to the 70s. Never missing, never gone. A constant, a fixed point. The only tenant who was there at the beginning and is still there now. Dolores, apartment 3B. 41 years, she'd told me. 41 years, and it had never once come to her door. I'd thought it was luck. Sitting in that library, I started to understand it wasn't luck at all. You don't survive 41 years in a feeding building by being lucky. You survive it by knowing exactly how the feeding works, and by making very sure you're never the one on the plate. I closed the microfilm reader and I drove home, and I didn't tell her what I'd found. I just smiled and thanked her for the tea and went upstairs. But I started watching her after that, the kind old woman with the banana bread. I started watching the way she watched the new faces come in. It came at 10:30. Knock, knock, knock. I gave it nothing. I breathed slow. I kept my eyes on the covered peephole, that little patch of tape, and I did not move and I did not speak. It worked through its whole repertoire. My voice asking to be let in. My voice casual, then confused, then frightened. Why won't you answer? Is something wrong? It's me, please. Then other voices. My mother, my ex-girlfriend, whose voice it should not have had, whose voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. It used her perfectly. It said things she used to say. It found the soft places and it pressed on them one by one, all night long. I gave it nothing. At one point, near 3 in the morning, it stopped knocking and it just stood there. I could feel it. There's a particular quality to the silence when it's standing at your door, a kind of pressure, a held breath. It stood there for what felt like an hour, and then, very softly, in a voice that was no voice I recognized, a voice that I think might have been its own, it said one thing: "You looked at me. You don't get to stop now." And then the knocking started again, and it didn't stop until dawn. That was the pattern for 11 nights. Every night it came. Every night I gave it nothing, and every night it was a little better, a little more specific, a little harder to ignore. Dolores had been right. Once it had your face, ignoring it doesn't make it leave. It just makes it work harder. And it had a lot more patience than I did. I stopped sleeping more than an hour or two. I started making mistakes at work. I lost the job, in fact, on the 9th day. Fell asleep on the line and got walked out. So now I was broke and haunted, and I couldn't afford to move even if moving would have helped, which Dolores told me gently it wouldn't. The 7th night was the one that nearly broke me, and I'll tell you about it because it's the one I still dream about. That night it didn't knock. It didn't use any voices. It just talked. Quietly, conversationally, right up against my door, in my own voice, like a man talking to himself in the next room. And what it talked about was me, things only I knew. The name I'd called myself as a child, a thing I'd done at 16 that I'd never told another living soul, that I'd carried alone for 13 years. It recited my secrets back to me, gently, one after another, in my own voice, for hours. Not as a threat. That's what undid me. It said them kindly, like it understood, like it was the only thing in the world that had ever really known me, standing patient on the other side of 2 inches of wood, asking for nothing but to be let in. By 4 in the morning, I was on my feet with my hand on the deadbolt. I had the bolt half turned. I wanted, more than I have ever wanted anything, to open that door and let the only thing that understood me come inside. What stopped me was the sun, gray light through the window across the floor. And the voice went quiet mid-sentence, the way it always did, and I took my hand off the lock and I slid down the door and I sobbed. Because I'd come so close. Because part of me was sorry the sun had come. "It's not the building," Dolores said the next morning when I told her how close I'd gotten. "It's you now. It's learned you. You could move across the country, it'd find the next dark hallway, and it'd be there. It's yours now, child. The only way out is to make it not yours. Make it not yours." I knew what she meant. She meant 5C. She meant the trade. And God help me, I thought about it. By night 11, running on no sleep and no money and no hope, I sat in my dark apartment, listening to my dead grandmother's voice beg me through the door. It had gotten her voice, somehow. I don't know how. She'd been dead 9 years. And I thought about the rule. Not me. Him. Go to him. I thought about every person who'd ever wronged me. I built a little list in my head in the dark of doors I could send it to. I'm not proud of that, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't do it. And then, on the 12th night, something changed. And it wasn't me that changed it. It was Pratt. On the 12th night, around 10, before the knocking had started at my door, I heard something I'd never heard in the building after 9. I heard a door open. Pratt's door, down at the end of the hall. And I heard him walk out into the hallway. I went to my own door, not to open it, just close to it. And I listened. And I could hear him out there, pacing, muttering. And then I heard him say out loud, in a voice that was cracked and exhausted and at the absolute end of itself, "I can't do this anymore. I can't. You hear me? I'm done. I'm done." He'd been holding out too. I realized it all at once. All those weeks, both of us behind our doors, neither of us saying a word. He'd been fighting the same fight, and he'd just lost it. I pressed myself to my door and I said as loud as I dared, Pratt, Get back inside. Get behind your door. Don't engage with it." And he laughed, a terrible, hollow laugh. And he said, "It's not at my door anymore, man. It hasn't been at my door in 3 nights. It's been giving me a choice." I asked him what he meant. "It told me I could give it someone else," he said. "It told me the rule. And I've been standing here for 3 nights trying to decide whose name to say. And tonight I decided I can't. I can't do that to somebody. I'd rather..." And he stopped, because down the hall, the lights had gone out. I heard it start to walk. I couldn't see it. My peephole was covered, and I would not have looked even if it wasn't. But I could hear it, that slow, patient, wrong-footed walk, coming up the hall from the fire door end where the impossible distance opened up in the dark. And Pratt was out there with it, in the hallway, after 9, with the lights out. I screamed at him through the door to run, to get inside, to get behind his deadbolt. And I heard him scrabbling at his own door, and I heard his keys, and I heard him drop them, that bright, awful jingle of keys hitting the floor in the dark. And I heard him go down on his knees, feeling for them, sobbing. And the footsteps kept coming, slow and even and certain. And they were close now. They were so close. And then Pratt did the thing you do when you're out of time and out of options, and the worst part of you takes the wheel. He said a name. I won't repeat it. It was a name I didn't recognize, somebody from his life, somebody outside the building, somebody who'd hurt him once, maybe, or somebody he just hated, or somebody whose name was simply the first one his panicking mind could find. He screamed it into the dark. "Take him, not me! Take him, go to him, his name is..." And he said it, and he said where they lived, a street, a number. He gave it everything, an address, a face. "Go there, go to them, not me, please, not me." And the footsteps stopped. There was a silence so total I could hear Pratt breathing through 2 doors and 40 feet of hallway. I held breath, a decision being made. And then I will hear this sound for the rest of my life. I heard it turn around. I heard those slow, even, wrong footsteps walk back down the hall, away from us, toward the fire door, toward the impossible, dark distance, getting smaller and smaller, and gone. And the hallway lights came back on, and Pratt knelt out there in the light with his keys finally in his hand, and he wept like I have never heard a person weep. Not with relief, with shame. Because it had worked, because he'd done it. Because somewhere out in the city there was a real person with a real name and a real door, and Pratt had just sent that thing to them, and it had agreed. Pratt moved out 4 days later. He didn't say goodbye. I saw him loading a van, and I went down and I tried to talk to him, and he wouldn't look at me. The last thing he ever said to me, with his eyes on the ground, was, "Don't ever do it, whatever happens. Don't ever do what I did. It doesn't go away. You just move it on to somebody who never did anything to deserve it." I check the news every day now, every day, waiting to see their name. And then he got in the van and he drove away. And I never saw him again. But here's the thing that I've never been able to stop thinking about. After Pratt left, it stopped coming to my door. Not because I'd beaten it. I hadn't. I'd been about to break. 2 more nights and I'd have said a name of my own. I know I would have. But after that night in the hallway, after it took Pratt's trade, it lost interest in me. Like a thing that's eaten its fill. Like it got what it wanted from our floor and moved on. And I have spent every day since wondering whether the name Pratt screamed into the dark bought my peace too. Whether I'm only free because somewhere out there a stranger I'll never meet started hearing knocking at their door, slow and even. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. Somebody who never read a laminated card. Somebody who has no idea what the rule is. Somebody who's going to look. I still live in the Hadley. I know how that sounds. I should have left. But Dolores was right. It's not the building. It's never been the building. And the rent is still $800 a month. And I'm still broke. And the truth is, I'd rather be here, where at least I know the rules, than out there starting over somewhere new where the next dark hallway is waiting. I cover my peephole. I'm inside by 9. I don't look. I don't answer. I wait for morning. And most nights now, it's quiet. But not all nights. Because here's the last thing. The thing I didn't understand until I'd lived here a full year. The reason the rent is so cheap. The reason there's always a vacancy at the Hadley, always a unit open, always a Mr. Voss in the lobby handing a laminated card to some broke, exhausted, desperate person who'll take any deal they can get. The building doesn't want the thing in the hallway to get bored. A bored thing goes looking somewhere else. A fed thing stays, and a fed thing keeps the building safe in its way, keeps it quiet, keeps it standing, keeps the old tenants like Dolores untouched, year after year after year. So they keep bringing in new faces, new people for it to learn, fresh tenants who don't know the rule, who'll look, who'll engage, who'll feed it just enough to keep it interested and keep it here. We're not residents. We're food, rotated in. A name to be screamed into the dark by the next desperate person when their time runs out. Dolores has been here 41 years, and it's never once come to her door. I used to think she was lucky. Now I understand she's just been here longer than anyone. And she's watched 100 people come through these doors, and every single one of them has either left or stopped being a problem, or become the trade that bought her another quiet decade. She brought me banana bread my first week. She told me the rules. She was so kind. I think about that a lot now. There's a unit opening up next month, 3D Pratt's old place. I saw Mr. Voss showing it to a young woman yesterday. Broke-looking, exhausted. The kind of person who'd take any deal she could get. He handed her a laminated card. I watched her read it. I watched her get to Rule 9. I watched her laugh. And from across the hall, I almost said something. I almost crossed that lobby and grabbed her arm and told her to run, to tear up the card, to never spend a single night in this place. But I didn't. Because if she stays, if she looks, if she feeds it, if she gives it a fresh new face to learn, then maybe it'll be a long, long time before it ever comes back to mine. The rent really is very good here. Just don't use your peephole after 9.